political parties, conservative, liberals, and DP, they're afraid. They don't want to speak about that. And also they're pandering to ethnic ridings near Toronto and near Vancouver. And for them, it's more important than fighting for Canadians.
And it's crazy. And the more immigrants they know that they're pouring in, because they're bringing them in from third world Islamic or Sikh nations. And then they come with an agenda, because we've said that there's nations within nations being built within our society. And that doesn't work. Multiculturalism is a failure worldwide in every Western nation when the host country's values are not being embraced. And we have a right to demand that everybody prior to Trudeau and others had to swear on the Bible when they came to Canada. If that's an oath you can't take, I'm sorry, you're not welcome to come here. It's just not going to work out. And when we're bringing immigrants in, we should be bringing like-minded people into Canada. I understand that immigration has a duty when there is a threat to an individual's well-being, a humanitarian threat, that they should set priority. And it is the Christians that are in these third world nations that are being burned alive, persecuted, raped, beheaded, and yet they're not being made the priority. And next week I have Majed El-Shafi coming on the show again from One Free World International, who's doing amazing work. And we've been having conversations about this. He says the question needs to be answered is, why is the Arab nation not bringing in, for example, the Palestinians? And that's because the Palestinians, every time they've entered their countries, have tried to overthrow them. So why is Trudeau being so naive to think the story is going to go differently in Canada when we're witnessing what we're witnessing in our streets? It needs to be shut down. It needs to be taken seriously.
Absolutely. When you speak about multiculturalism, you have a point there, because the philosophy, the idea of that act, because it's in the law in Canada, it's every culture are equal. And that's not true. Every culture are not equal. When you are, and you said it very well, when we are importing people coming from the third world, we are importing conflicts. And that's happening in our country, in big cities, in Toronto. They're importing their internal conflicts from their first country, from their country of origin. And they're not part of the country. They won't integrate in our country, because when they're coming here, we are telling them, you can, don't embrace our culture, don't be part of our society. You can live in a ghetto because, we believe in multiculturalism, and you are bringing something positive to the country. No, we need to be able to have an interview like we did a couple of years ago. We had interviews with everyone who wanted to come to our country. And like you just said, they must share our Canadian values. They must understand that everybody is equal before the law, men and women here in Canada, that we are a country that is created under the supremacy of God. That's important. You said it also. And we have a Charter of Rights. We need to have a discussion with each one of one. And if they don't agree with that, it's a privilege, and it must be a privilege to be Canadian. It's not the case anymore. That open border mass immigration policy, it's killing our country. And that's why it's not only about the economy anymore. Yes, the economy is important, but more than that, it's our culture and our country. And we are fighting for Western civilization values. And we must be proud of that. We must fight. And I believe that people have two choices if they want to keep this country. They have two choices. They can be silent and politically correct and do nothing, or, they can fight for their values and being sure that we'll have the country that we want, that we loved, and bringing these changes here in Canada. And I'm very pleased that people are ready, and more people are coming to fight for the country, to fight for our kids. Can you believe, Tanya, that I told you when I decided to be a politician, it was all about the economy. I never thought that saying as a politician that there's only two sexes, that will be a taboo. I never thought that 15 years ago and now I have to say that in my speech. I have just to say to people, there's only two sexes, by the way. It's a crazy one.
It's
so crazy.
upside down.
Yeah, and now I've read in the press in UK that a man can, breastfeeding a baby. Yeah, it's I have to laugh. It's so crazy. But Poliev and Trudeau won't say anything about that. They're afraid of the radical leftists and of the media. And I'm having fun just telling the truth based on science, on biology, on facts. And no, it's crazy. Doing a speech in politics, saying that there's only two sexes, and saying that a boy cannot be a girl and a girl cannot be a boy. Yeah, absolutely. And the public opinion is moving on our side. The propaganda and the fear and the leftist ideology. People now more and more realize that it cannot work, and they just want to go back to it's like at every election, journalists are asking me, how many black guy do you have as candidate? How many LGBTQ candidates do you have? And we never answered this question because and I said that to journalists. We don't care. We don't want to know. They're coming, and if they're a candidate for the People's Party, it's because they want to fight in line with our values and they agree with our platform, our ideas, our vision for this country. But it's all about race, and I'm fed up with that. And I believe that I'm not the only one. More and more people understand. If you're an entrepreneur in Canada and you want to have a subsidies from the federal government, you need to be a black entrepreneur. They have a program only for black entrepreneurs. So it's racism, it's sexism, that's what it is. And all that diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion, it's racism, it's division, and they want to kill the family unit at the same time.
Yeah, it's gone so beyond, and we know that it's part of the UN Agenda 2021-2030, annihilate the family, cause division and destruction. It's all this nasty socialist plan, the Marxist plan. It's been done multiple times before, but we're on the front line here, just really bellowing out, the warning to Canadians: please spread this video, spread this information. You couldn't have two people just hitting you with better truth and truth bombs than we are. And it's so easy to speak the truth because it's the truth. And before we just go on, I want to emphasize as well, when we talk about mass immigration, this has nothing to do with race or the color of anybody's skin. This has to do with the condition of the heart and the condition of the mind. And we know that, as you said, not all cultures are equal. Otherwise, you know what? Christians would be safe in the countries that I named earlier, but they're not safe. Yeah. They're racist against Christians. And guess what? Those Christians are brown. And guess what? My God doesn't know the color of your skin. And there are Christians in Canada that are of all colors. And all ethnicities. So this is not, it is to race bait using this language. The media tries to bait you into this. And you know what? It is okay to say, no, we don't have any LGBTQ candidates because that is not in line with our values. If that is what the party's values are, you should be able to speak those values, because I can tell you Canadians are sick and tired of this being the focus of absolutely everywhere you go. Our kids are being propagandized in the schools. That little flag, that little stolen rainbow has so much power, and they knew it. And the creator of that flag said that's what flags are for. Flags are about proclaiming power. So the spaces need to be neutral. The schools need to be cleaned up of this. It isn't against the gay or lesbian themselves. You're free to live your life. But as Pierre Elliott Trudeau put this, the government should not be in the bedrooms of the people, and we don't want you in the bedrooms of in our classrooms. We want you to leave our kids alone. And once that's done, you know what? This needs to become a non-issue again. Everybody mind their own business, go and live your life, and quit shoving your ideologies down our throats. And that's, to me, what the party of PPC is doing. We're saying we're talking on equality. And that should be the bottom line, that everybody in Canada is treated equally. So what is your opinion? Also,
but don't forget about the leader of the NDP. He was, on side with Indian terrorists a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and for him also, when Fidel Castro died a couple of years ago, he was saying very good things about Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro was a murderer, a communist, and that was the legacy of Fidel Castro is not good. But for him, he's a real socialist, he's an authoritarian politician like Trudeau, and that's why we are living in a socialist, we have a socialist authoritarian government. And you're right about the election. I strongly believe, like you, Tanya, that we won't have an election this spring. We won't have an election next fall because they look at polls and focus group. That's only that for traditional politicians. Trudeau cannot win if there's an election now. And also Jack Mead will have fewer seats. So they won't, and the NDP can say everything that he wants to Trudeau and say, I want that. If I don't have that, I won't support you in Parliament. He will, because he doesn't have any advantages to go and have an election right now. He will have fewer members of Parliament. So that being said, it's sad because we are ready for an election. We want an election as soon as possible, but it will come. And the date, I believe, will be in fall 2025.
Right. And your strong voice in being that party to change the trajectory of the conversation is how the pendulum swings. And this is how our vote is so much going to count because of combined the work that Maxime Bernier is doing at the PPC, Action for Canada is doing boots on the ground and within our communities and assisting in doing that and applying the pressure. The other thing that Action for Canada is doing, our communities, I love it as our chapters get solidified in a community. We get a chapter leader, they start reaching out and they go to elected officials. We have NDP MLAs that are actually inviting us back, our chapter leaders for meetings, and they are willing to hear what we have to say. They're actually not knowledgeable about what was going on, whether about Soji, an MLA who's terribly vaccine injured. His wife is a nurse and he's like, he had no idea what he was participating in. And so we don't go in with a heavy hand. We go in depending on who the elected official is. If they're down and outright globalists, if they're down and outright intentionally hurting our kids, we're going to lean in. But if it's an opportunity to educate, we're doing that as well, even with MPs. And so the work is there. This is tremendous. I want to call it a partnership, ally, friendship.
We created that party in the beginning on 4 principles, and one of our most important policy, it's fighting against mass immigration. I did that in 2019. And, people were saying, journalists were saying that I was a racist and a xenophobe because I was arguing for fewer immigrants, ending mass immigration. The population was not ready at that time, but I told them, we cannot do that. I was right at that time, and I'm even more right. So fighting against mass immigration is our core policy because everything is happening because of that. Healthcare crisis, fewer jobs for Canadians, salaries and that are going down, everything. And at the same time, housing crisis. It's everything, it's because of mass immigration. We need to stop that. And that's why I'm looking at what is happening in other countries in Europe. Marine Le Pen, she may be the new president for France. And yes, she fought against mass immigration for a long time, since I believe, her father actually was like a racist over there before because he was fighting against mass immigration. So now, and you said Sweden now, they're not speaking about ending mass immigration. They did it. Now they're speaking about deportation. They're there in their public debate, deportation. So yeah, it's happening in other countries, and it's important for us to have this debate. And for us as a political party, if you think that it's so important to fight mass immigration, to preserve our country, our culture, we are the only national political party in Canada that will do that, that is speaking about that since the creation of our party in 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's great. And I know that you were talking about economic students as well and shutting that down. And
Yeah.
I was
And
reading
deportation for them. There's 700 of them that came
Yep.
illegally with fake permit. They must be deported. And actually, Immigration Canada issue, I believe, 10,000 deportation letters to illegal immigrants, but they're still in Canada. We must act. We must do that deportation. You know, imagine what signal we are sending to people across the world. Yeah, we are opening our borders, and if you come illegally, it's okay. We'll issue you a deportation later, but we won't do anything. So, you know, we need to act. There's legislation, and when they don't respect the legislation, that must be the first reason to deport these people.
100%. And yeah, I appreciate you speaking so forthright and boldly on that, Maxime, because we're considered a joke to the rest of the world. And, you know, we've been shamed, us nice Canadians, this military style psychological warfare, you know, to call us haters and intolerant. And it's like, we've been so tolerant to our demise. There comes a point where you got to wake up and stop being silly and understand that your family is at risk. We are inviting people. We have people in this nation that hate us and mean us harm, whether it's the CCP and the communist Chinese here, whether it's the radical Khalistanis that are actually sitting in government, whether it's the radical Islamic Muslim Brotherhood that are actually in positions in government, and they should all be expelled. I mean, there needs to be a hard line that nobody can run for office in this country if you serve other foreign interests. It's just smart and common sense. It's not racist. And if I can't go to one of the 56 Islamic majority countries, China, Pakistan, and North Korea, and run as a candidate as a white Christian woman, then why are we allowing this in what's good for the goose is good for the gander? I say shut her down in Canada and come on, let's toughen up our very sovereignty. The nation is at complete risk of being annihilated at this point, and we need to take a really hard stand.
Absolutely. And, you know, when I remember, I believe maybe 15 years ago, if you wanted to be a Canadian and you're a new immigrant in our country, you had to demonstrate that you can speak English or French. You know, it's important. We want you to integrate our culture. So if you cannot speak the language, you cannot integrate. But now it's not the case anymore. And I have an example of that. Pierre Poilievre did a press conference with the number 2 of his party. And the number 2, I don't remember his name, from Hindu origin, Canadian from Hindu origin, start the press conference by speaking Punjabi. Speaking Punjabi, that's not the official language in Canada. Why? Because these people are coming here, they don't speak English or French, and they are pandering to them. So they are speaking another language that is not an official language in an official press conference that has been called by the leader of the opposition. So we cannot tolerate that. It's offensive. There's 2 official languages. Yeah, there's 2 official languages. That's it. And actually, somebody told me a couple of months ago, Maxime, you must translate your video and everything in Chinese and Portuguese. I said, no, I won't do that. You know, it's English and French. That's it. And you come here, you must be able to speak. And if not, and that's why we must go back to the point system. We were giving more points, and when you speak the language, but we don't have that anymore.
Well, it's got to turn around, and I'm just going to give the story again about my mom and my 4 uncles and my grandmother moved to Canada from the Netherlands. They were already learning the language before they came, English, and they right away signed up for English within months of being here. And my mom said, we never spoke Dutch in public. And I always asked, why, Mom? And she said, because out of respect for Canadians, we were so grateful to be here. And I can literally, I live in Surrey. I can't go to the bank. I cannot go to the grocery store where people around me, or Costco. I can't actually go to Costco because I'm banned. But anyways, I can't go anywhere and I can't understand anybody. And I turn, there was a Muslim woman working at Canadian Tire, and another Muslim co-worker came up and spoke to her. I'm returning something, and they're speaking is Islamic, and I turned to them and I said, "You need to speak English." I was very bold about it. You're in a position, that is to the public, serving the public. You cannot speak the language. But if we don't stop this, Maxime, that is the way, because we're pushovers. And I was saying in the weekly update that I'm asking Canadians, I know money needs to be raised for the People's Party as well, but there are certain actions that we need to take, because Protestant and Catholicism are the only two religions recognized in Canada. And when you have mosques, Islamic centers, and Islamic schools that are teaching kids to hate Canadians, and that, for instance, wishing Merry Christmas to a Canadian is worse than rape or murder, those institutions need to be shut down. And because of the massive problem, like I had East Indian neighbors, super nice people, we got along great, but they were sending their kids to the Kalistani school every single morning from the time they get into school, and they don't speak English. We're offended by that. It holds up our kids from learning and thriving. It holds your kids up from thriving. It's not hateful to talk about this. And again, I don't care if you're white and you're coming into, if you were Polish by the masses or Ukrainian coming in here by the masses and not respecting our culture and our way of life, we are going to be offended. So don't buy into the government calling us racist or intolerant or hateful. No, we love our country enough to protect it, and we need all of you shifting from this mind management that you've been under for decades. Take a shift and say, by gum, I have a right and a duty to stand up for my government and for our country. And I need you on the front lines with us. And I need you supporting Action for Canada financially. I'm just going to put a little plug in here right now, because there are actions that I need to take that I don't want to discuss in advance. We don't want to give the enemy a heads up. But let me just tell you, it's very serious what Maxime and I are talking about, and we can't do that. And don't say, it's not just one lawyer that I'm dealing with. There's others. And again, I'm not going to discuss those things. But it's very, very important. And legal actions take money. And don't sit back and start, chastising anybody for raising money. And Maxime, I know that you are doing an appeal in your case, and you put out an appeal to raise money for that appeal. And I had to do an appeal. And because of the massive attacks against Rocco, thank God I had and thank Canadians for allowing me to have this war chest. I never spoke a word a year and a half ago. I just wrote that check. And it wasn't awful that Rocco needed more funds to fight this war for us. He has a firm to run, and shame on anybody for chastising any lawyers that have a firm. Plus, Rocco has given so much of his time to so many Canadians and volunteered his time to help them. And so I just feel a need to nip that in the bud right now.
You're right, Tanya. We as a political party, we're doing the fight in the political area, but also personally, I'm doing the fight. As you know, I fought against Trudeau and the vaccine passport with Brian Pitford. That was illegal and constitutional, but we didn't win at the federal court. We appealed that. We didn't win at the appeal court. And now we are appealing at the Supreme Court of Canada. We may have a decision maybe in 6 months or something like that. But it's important. We need to fight, in the street, politically, and also in the courts. And there's a lot of organizations that are doing that. And I'm pleased that you're doing that also on your side.
We've got such good strategies and such good fights. We've had such a massive win that I can't even talk about. But you know what? It's because we've got more wins coming in this area. But I just want Canadians to be encouraged. Like, we're working with really great people. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go to a bit of a Q&A. There's people that have asked some questions, so I'll try to zip through some of these. let me just see. It says, can you ask Maxime to comment on continued attack on Canada's sovereignty through the UN programs like UNDRIP, WHO, UNRWA, etc.?
Yeah.
And I remember years ago that one of the first things I was asking you, Maxime, are you willing to pull out of the UN?
Yes, we will using our money. So my answer for that is, we will finance the UN when they will fight in line with our values, and that's a socialist organization. So we'll save a lot of money because we won't give money, and also we won't sign the compact, the migration compact coming from the UN, because for them migration must be normal. Everybody must be able to go in any country. No, we must end that. We won't sign the migration compact. We won't sign the Paris Accord. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. So yes, all these international organizations, we are saying no to them, and including the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization. We have all the competencies and the good people in Canada to have the right policies for our country. So that's why I'm saying no to foreign interference and fighting for the sovereignty of our country.
Yeah, somebody said in there, Pamela said, Maxime, I want you to be PM for 20 plus years. Yeah, we need you, Maxime. I'm just sitting here. I get all pumped up. I hope everybody else does too. And I just want to let people know, before I was talking about the populist movement, and as you had mentioned, Marine Le Pen in France, who did I say? Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. Yes. And it took time pressing in so that the citizens got behind the leaders like Maxime, who is saying exactly everything we need. And I'm telling you, this is not for the popular vote. He's not just doing this, to tickle your ears. Maxime believes this. This is what I bet you when, like, I wake up on the feet, when I roll out of bed, I actually say, God, my feet are hitting the floor. Like, here we go. And Maxime, he embraces everything that we're talking. He has a passion about this. He has a passion for Canada, protect it for his daughters, for your children. He's fighting for all of us. Okay, would you support an independent office of science? It says answers to Auditor General, because AG understands independent, to conduct quality assurances involving testing, checking, and replicating any science before policies are made. One application would be the UN IPCC climate change science that every level of government has swallowed hook, line, and sinker without checking.
It's not science. It's not science. When you cannot confront that, when you cannot have a discussion, and they're always saying there's a consensus. When you hear the word consensus, it's because they don't want to have a discussion, because they know that we are on the right side of the argument. They don't want to. They're doing that. There's a consensus on climate change. No, there's no consensus. The climate is always changing, and we don't have to do anything about that. But that's our position. And what I want to do also, it's a parliamentary commission, and having put in that in front of the public, everything that happened during COVID-19. We cannot just turn the page and forget it. No, what they did to us, to the population, to Canadian divisions and segregation, and forcing people to take a vaccine that is not a vaccine, it was unconstitutional. So we need to reopen that debate, and we will do that. We will ask for an independent parliamentary commission that will bring experts and put that in the news, I want Canadians to understand, because if you're still going and opening your TV, turning on your TV every night, like I said to my dad, turn off the TV and everything will go well. But we must do that. And that's why I like what you're doing every week, Tanya. Just short, half an hour. This is the important news. It's going well, in the right direction. We still have work to do, and we understand, and we are doing that. So I just want to add also about that, Tanya, that if you are there, you are listening, and you like what I'm saying, and you want to know more, go on our website, peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Our platform is there. Click on platform, read it. It won't change. And if you want to do another step, if you want to be a candidate and being part of the change, being an agent of change, you can be a candidate for us. We're going to open a call for candidates March 1st. You can go on our website and write to us at info@peoplespartyofcanada.ca.
Trenzio, can you bring up the site for a minute? Because I'm glad that you brought this up. That was on one of my notes to do this. And soon, I think as of March 1st, are you going to be vetting candidates again, right, for the regions that you currently have empty?
Absolutely. We have about 125 candidates approved and selected for the next election. We need 338. So we'll have a list of ridings where we need a candidate. And, read the platform, you share our ideas, you're in line with our principles, our vision of the country, be part of the change, and be with us to fight against that tyranny and these globalists.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And I know that because you and I, like, our values so closely align, even as Christians, our values align as well. And with Action for Canada, our chapter leaders, so many of our members embrace the Christian foundation of Canada. And as I've said, there's many, many non-believers now who have written me and said, Tanya, you know what? I completely agree with you. I see the validity of what you're saying, that the principles from which we were gifted with, which are biblical Christian principles, do set us apart from totalitarian extremist nations. And so this is something to embrace. And even the LGBTQ should be embracing this, because I'm telling you, you go and send these radical trans activists right now down to Lebanon or Qatar or Syria, or let's just say maybe Palestine right now, and see how they would fare. And so people aren't thinking logically. They are just, there's like this spirit of offense that's gone across this nation, and they'd rather have a knee-jerk reaction and be offended than actually think critically for a moment, rather than what the media and the junk that they're filling their heads with, and the propaganda and the hate and the intolerance. Talk about intolerance. It's not on our side. We don't suffer from intolerance. Yeah.
And that's why people must have the courage of their conviction. What is the goal if you have the best ideas, the best values, but if you don't fight for it, nothing will happen. So you need to be strong, fight for your values, have the courage to speak in line with your conviction. It's easy when you have a discussion with a friend and that is telling you something that it's not in line with your values, or you're saying, no, you're wrong. You want to please people. That's the first reflex that we have, and stay silent. And I'm telling you, don't stay silent. Be polite, but questions, and just put your ideas out there.
Yeah, and then people often say the other side, the little tree huggers or whatever. I like tree huggers too, but they want to say it's all about love. We should just all be loving. And it's like, well, you know what? It's not loving to tolerate people who are coming in and are attacking people within our nation. There has to be boundaries. Have you ever seen those people who had really poor boundaries and they got themselves into very dysfunctional situations? And then once they realized that they were in dysfunctional situations because those decisions were their own. And so what we're trying to do is to say it is okay to have healthy boundaries for Canada. And we can speak that in love. I love the immigrants coming to Canada enough to say, look, did you like what you left? Like, why are you coming to Canada? And so just a little nudge and a reminder, you need to brush your feet off and put that life behind you, because you are being welcomed in to freedom, and you need to understand how to embrace that. In order to embrace it, you have to let something go. You have to let something dysfunctional that wasn't working for you. You need to let that go. And so I love people enough to say, you know what, to the LGBTQ community, I love you enough to say when you're being lied to. It isn't loving to tell our kids that they're born in the wrong body, to support this to the point where they get sterilized and then go and have their bodies mutilated, because that's what they're doing. It's actually a federal offense in Canada to mutilate a body. But Trudeau and these deviants, and they turned around and twisted that section of the law and say, oh, except for like if a doctor says it's okay. Well, these doctors need to be arrested and they need to be convicted. And if not, at the very least, they need to have the surgical procedure conducted on themselves before they go further in mutilating anybody else. That's what I would like to see happen. Then tell me how much they enjoy the money that they're making on the lives, the harm, and the injury that they are causing to others. Then this is more loving my position than I think that any of the left have ever been to anybody. Okay, I know it's late for you.
And that's why we are loving kids also. And our position as a political party is to prohibit the use of puberty blockers for minors, and to prohibit the mutilation of children and minors. You need to change the criminal code, and that will be the same policy all across the country. And we are the only party that is saying, let's change the criminal code, and that must be criminal. Same thing also for euthanasia. It must be criminal for a doctor or a nurse to say to a patient, maybe, we can kill you also if you want. It must be criminal. And we need to stop that. We are living in an era that glorifies death. We need to end that. It must be life, not death. But we need to change all that. And we are fighting for that with you, Ania.
Yeah, a certain death culture. But there's something, as I'm thinking death culture, that I had in the weekly update. I am sorry, but I actually celebrate it. But Florida has already passed it, but the death penalty for pedophiles. There's got to be a line, because there's so much tolerance right now. They have no fear. They're blatantly out sexualizing and grooming our children in libraries and in the public forum and in the education system. And this seriously needs to come to a stop. Okay, let me throw a few more questions at you. Yeah. I've been trying to keep up with it. Normally Heather is on and in the background, but she was elsewhere. So she's not helping me out right now if anybody else can. So there's one question, of course, Maxime, I don't even really want to address this about splitting the vote, because it's like, it's getting ad nauseum that this question is being asked. Yeah. It's like, you're either going to do like they've done in the Netherlands and what's coming in France, and you're going to have the conviction that the only way to start turning this government around is to start voting with your conscience. So anyways, what do you want to add to that, Maxime?
I just want to add shortly, when you speak about splitting the vote, there's an assumption there that we, the People's Party, and the Conservative are the same. We are not the same. I just told you the last hour on immigration, on radical gender ideology, on climate change, on the UN. We are not the same. So you're not splitting anything. It's not like when you have an apple and you split the apple, you have two pieces of an apple. We're different on the most important public policies for the country. So we're not splitting any vote. That's Polyev, we're splitting the Liberals' vote, because he has the same policies than the Liberal on these important issues. He's the one who's splitting the vote. He's splitting the Liberal votes. And that's why he's only Conservative in name.
Absolutely. And so another thing I want to encourage people as well, as they think, okay, how can I do this? And this is something that Action for Canada has been desperately working on for years, is to build our chapters up. And then we have, I call it communities within communities of like-minded people, so that when we come to any election, we have candidates that we can rise up. Now, Action for Canada doesn't have third parties, but we have those communities within those groups that can go and do their own thing, go do the door knocking and get people elected. And that's what we are encouraging. In the election in 2022, we got a number of our chapter leaders and some members elected as school board trustees. Muslims should not be able to run for candidacy unless they're going to swear an oath on the Bible and base everything on biblical principles. And I find that's going to be terribly difficult for them. That's a conversation for another time, I guess. But the point being, if we want our people elected, we can easily do that if we can get 1,000 people together in a chapter who are ready to go out door knocking and help these candidates who are putting everything on the line for every single Canadian to run for office. And that's our objective as an organization. And again, we're meeting in the churches. Pastors are actually becoming chapter leaders. It's pretty exciting. And they're running videos in church regarding Action for Canada. Things are taking a corner. So be encouraged, everybody, but don't sit back and just like this video. Find out if there's a chapter. Find out if you want to run as a PPC candidate. I've always got to give a little plug for the Christian Heritage Party as well. Yeah. Rod Taylor's an awesome person as well. We don't want to, everywhere where there's a vote, if there's a candidate that aligns with your values, get out, support them, and you might be surprised at the results.
And I want also to thank Rod, because when I was running in a by-election in Portage-Lisgard, Rod decided not to have a Christian candidate, and that his organization was helping me in Portage-Lisgard. So yeah, Rod always fought for what he believed, and since the creation of the Christian Heritage, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's a wonderful guy, but you have developed a platform for yourself, Maxime. You are definitely just that louder voice that's been out there going across the country, traveling, and really, really doing the work. I super commend you for all the work that you've done in your party and your people. I know what it takes. We've got a small core team at Action for Canada at the national level, and our chapter leaders, which would be similar to your candidates, are working like crazy 7 days a week, some of us, to change the direction that Canada is going. And so you have just been, good thing you run marathons now and then. You need to be conditioned for this kind of work.
I must tell you, Tanya, that I witnessed some of your leaders in different places around the country when I'm traveling and giving speeches. After that, I'm with people shaking hands and, I'm from Action Canada here. I'm the leader there. I'm the chapter leader there. So yeah, you have an organization. People are out there. And, they're giving me the pamphlet. And I say, I know that pamphlet. I know that by heart. That's the right ideas. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, okay, team, is there anything else that anybody would like to ask? It says, I don't know if you're going to have an answer for this one, because we're just going to keep pressing forward and we see the courts responding, is that how can the unvaccinated find justice for losing their rights and freedoms when the courts are so broken?
Yeah, we have a challenge with the court, you're right. And actually, because that's the Prime Minister who is appointing judges, and we have woke judges. And I believe, that's why it's very difficult for us to have a fair judgment. So that being said, we need to do a little bit like in the US. When they want to appoint a judge, that judge must go, in front of the committee, question about him, question about what he believes in. And after that, they can vote. So I believe that in Canada, we must change the way that we are selecting our judges. It must be more open, more transparent. We must have a debate, a discussion with that candidate in Parliament before appointing anybody.
Absolutely. And, the more I see how things are governed in the United States as far as their law enforcement, we need to revamp the RCMP at the federal level. They're not doing their job. They're not doing their job. They're failing us miserably. They've had all the evidence they needed, and they could have arrested Justin Trudeau a long time ago. And I provided them the evidence they needed for officials here in British Columbia, hands down. These are nasty people committing crimes against humanity. And so I look forward eventually somewhere in the future to making sure this never, ever happens again.
But there are CMPs, a woke organization. Our Canadian forces are a woke organization also. We need to change all that. And that's why I'll be in Durham this Friday. There's a by-election there, March 4th. We have a candidate, Patricia. She's working hard. I was with her last weekend and the other weekend also. But I will do a press conference this Friday about our policies, against wokeism, more details. And, I believe that people will like it. We have specific changes that we want to bring our values and to stop that racism, sexism, and wokeism in our country.
Absolutely. And just this hyper focus on it. And I know that a couple of different areas. One, I want to just, before we pass on the conversation about law enforcement, I want to commend the police officers that have to go to work every day under their tyrannical leadership. I know that there were police officers who came into the force having a dream of serving their country and serving people. And like our nurses and doctors, they've been extorted, manipulated, coerced into taking the jab. Many have lost their jobs. And I have been saying for years, pre-COVID, countries do not fall into tyranny if the police and the military stand on the side of the people and not the government. And so I'm just going to encourage you again, there's going to come a point where you may have to decide, are you going to stand on the side of government to keep your job and eventually lose your freedoms completely? Or are you going to stand with the people? And I'm encouraging you to stand with the people, because we never again want to see what happened in Ottawa to fellow citizens from you brutes, from those of you who are brutes, and you were hiding behind your helmets and your masks, and you should all be called up and named when Trudeau goes down for that tyrannical move against the citizens. I believe that every officer was in violation of their oath. They had a choice that they made that day, and that they should be held to account. Okay.
And yes, they had a choice. I just want to add about that. Yes, they had a choice. Actually, 2 days ago, I was in a little village in Quebec in a restaurant and freedom fighters. And I said to him, were you able to have your restaurant open during the lockdown? He said, yes, because our local police, they were on our side. They came and they had dinner at my restaurant. So you have good officers that are there and for the people, but that's the top. They're corrupt, and we need to change that.
I love it. And, you know, the majority of police, I think, are good. And do you hear what Maxime is saying? Those few at the top, you're the majority. We're the majority as Canadians. You're the majority in the force and the military. And, you know, it's been incremental that the government is chipping away at you and defunding you and really hurting the forces so that they can't even fight. And so you have a choice right now. We're in a crossroads. We have this opportunity to turn things around in Canada. It's multiple levels. And Maxime, I want people to understand as well that you've evolved and you've come a long way as far as the abortion issue is concerned. I don't want to leave the show without addressing that. I'm so happy that it's part of your party policy right now. I was just like, I'm not going to support any party that doesn't have it as part of party policy. And so very grateful to you for so many of the decisions that you're making. And, you know, like I said, you came from almost like with horse blinders on. You had a career, it was in finance, and you took this leap. And people need to be gracious. And these high expectations, you know, of you when you came out that door. And then I know for myself, I was like, meet me, you know, Maxime, when I would see you on different issues. And then you had other people, you know, that are like, oh, you know, you got to know about these issues. And then as you became aware, it became part of your party policy on so many different campaigns. I got one more I want to say, though, actually, because it hit me so hard in the fall. And again, it's this massive UN agenda as part of 2030. Have you touched on UNDRIP at all? Have you touched on that issue?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a sovereign country. They can do what they want. We don't want anything. We don't want to deal with that organization anymore. So that's easy. And so we will affirm our sovereignty as a country. And speaking about abortion, you're right. I said, and I tweeted about that, we are killing unborn babies in this country, and that must stop.
Yeah, amen to that. And then as well, there was this verse in the Bible that said, when you come and you enter a country, do not sign treaties. And we're paying the consequence for our forefathers signing some treaties. And with the natives, I just want people to understand, again, there's this psychological warfare going on for you. They are using and extorting the natives. The UN, the government, doesn't give us a hoot about the natives as people, as human beings. They are using them as pawns to advance an agenda to take our land rights. And in BC, the corrupt NDP, David Eby, has been signing secret legislation, secret agreements. It's not legislation. They're unlawful, and they're against our Constitution, and they need to be revoked immediately, giving 90% of our public land over to the natives. They don't have a right to do that. It's not colonialism. No. We didn't come in and steal the land. We came in, the Europeans came in, and they began to develop a nation. There were hundreds of different tribes in Canada that were all infighting. Some of them were scalping. It was nasty business. It's not to say there weren't nice people, but there was no collaboration. They weren't providing a nice society from which they could develop what our founding forefathers from Europe gifted us with. And so to poison that, to poison it and make out that the white colonialists, as I've reported on, huge report that I gave the presentation and all the evidence is that the graves are indeed empty, right? The murdered and missing Indigenous women were at the hands of the natives themselves. It wasn't white people killing them all. And that's a government report that we've made public. And instead, you know what? It was to fuel and manipulate everybody. It was to instill hate in the natives who were fighting for. And those chiefs, not all of them, there's some good chiefs, but a lot of the chiefs are extorting money from Canadians. And they're on board with this because they think they have a right to take over the natural resources. We came into Canada fair and square. We came in not murdering, raping, or pillaging like the Muslims have in the Christian nations. We came in and we developed a magnificent country, envy of the world. And the natives have not progressed, and they could not progress, and they can't progress without Canadian taxpayer dollars. And so now if they think they're so great and we're so horrible, I call on the Trudeau government to stop all funding immediately. If that's how they feel about us, we owe them nothing. Stop paying the hundreds and billions of dollars and finally do something on your own. And then because we should all be treated equally in Canada. And that's when they, as a people, will begin to thrive.
Yeah, and that's why, if you want to know more from us on our side at the PPC, we want to abolish and repeal the Indian Act. You know, that's a racist act. It's based on race. You know, they're part of our society. They must be with us and in reserve right now. They cannot buy a home. It's communism there. So it's not a capitalist, free capitalist economy on a reserve. We need to change that. We need, and when I'm speaking about that to some chiefs across the country, they said, yes, Maxime, we want to be like you. We don't like the Indian Act also. So yes, let's do that revolution and bringing them in our society, fully part of our society.
That's absolutely, I'm in agreement. And as well, and I'm glad that they realized that. And as well, when UNDRIP in British Columbia was being signed in 2018, a lawyer warned the chief saying, do not sign this. This is not a good deal for you because you will become wards of the state. And what do you know? They've become wards of the states, and now they're using UNDRIP, which is United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, a UN agenda, an unelected body who are interfering with our democracy. This needs to be revoked immediately, and all the secret treaties that are being signed with the NDP government. That's treason. What the NDP government in BC is doing at this point.
And the good news about that, people must remember that we are a sovereign country. Yes, other government can sign treaty, but a new government can just withdraw from this treaty. And the best example of that is Donald Trump. Donald Trump, when he became president, he said, I don't want to deal with the Paris Accord with that. And I don't want to be part of that. He withdrew from the Paris Accord. That was not enforced in America under President Trump. After that, you know, Biden said, oh, yeah, I want to be part. I'm a big socialist. I believe in climate change. I want to be part of that. He signed the Paris Accord. So we are a sovereign country. We can just, you know, get rid of all these treaties and bring and fighting for us in line with our values and with our priorities as a country.
Right. And I want to bring one more document again to people's awareness as we're talking about the sovereignty of our nation. The coronation oath was signed in Canada and sworn that Canada would be governed by Christian Protestant principles, biblical principles. That's a living, breathing, signed document today. Prince Charles signed it a year ago, which means that is an obligation. Even when the charter was signed and Queen Elizabeth signed the charter, that means, again, the God, capital G-O-D of the charter, is the God of the Bible, because she could not be in violation of the oath, which meant that anything that she signed in had to align with Christian principles. If not, that too has to be revoked. And so we're on very good ground with this. We just have to assert all of our rights and all of the documents that our forefathers have signed. And all of that is beautifully ahead of us. Before we close, I'm just going to read a little something to you that somebody put in the chat, Maxime. I love it, Richard. It says, "We're Christians first and 50-year members of the Conservative Party. However, we can no longer in good conscience in honoring our Lord by voting for the PC any longer. We are thankful for Maxime and the PPC party. We are in a very strong conservative riding, and everyone has seen our conservative election sign in our yard. I'm sure it will draw attention when we have our PPC sign up."
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. And you know, you won't be disappointed, because if you like us and the platform today, in 10 years, it will be the same one. So we won't disappoint you. We will always fight for your values and for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maxine. It's just been a treat having you on the show. I look forward to having you again. Keep us updated on what's going on in Durham there. Hopefully you'll have a celebration. It's coming at some point. And I just praise the Lord for you and thank you so much, and just pray that he would just honor the work of your hands and your team. We'll have you on again soon.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm very pleased that I have that opportunity with you. Thank you very much, and big success to us.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.